You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj and the journalist and broadcaster Sonia Sodha. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Financial Times reports the US trade deficit reaching a record high in March, with imports massively outstripping exports as transactions made before Trump's tariff scheme kick in. Sources have told the Guardian newspaper that Donald Trump has made a trade deal with the UK a second-order priority, hampering British attempts to meet their mid-May deadline. Our children are starving. A stark headline on the Daily Mirror of the 65,000 children in Gaza who are facing severe malnutrition as authorities report food and aid trucks are stopped by Israel. The Daily Telegraph leads on comments made by former Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair, who has attacked Starmer's net zero policies, claiming it's wrong to ask people to make financial sacrifices when their impact on global emissions is minimal. The same story on the Times, which adds Blair's warning that there needs to be a radical reset of irrational net zero policies because they are doomed to fail. Same story also features on the front of the Eye. The Metro reports that two men on trial for allegedly filming themselves while cutting down the famous Sycamore Gap tree have been described by the prosecution as being on a moronic mission. Wills and Kate on Love Island, says The Sun, referring to the Prince and Princess of Wales, who spent their 14th wedding anniversary meeting locals today on the Isle of Mull. And tonight we are joined by Ali Miraj and Sonia Sodha to take us through the papers. Welcome to you both. Let us start with The Guardian. It's obviously 100 days since Trump came to power, but the focus of this story is the trade deal, the potential trade deal that we know Sir Keir Starmer is chasing desperately. We read, according to the Guardian, that we're not the first priority in terms of handing out deals. Sonia?
Yes, so Keir Starmer has made a big deal of the fact that he's trying to get a good trade deal with the United States, but he also wants to be resetting relations with the European Union. There are issues on both sides of that. One is that actually it may not be compatible to have a very good trade deal with both the EU and the US concurrently, because the US would want us to water down some of our regulatory standards in a market such as food, for example, whereas the EU would want us to stay dynamically aligned with their much higher food welfare standards. So that's a bit of a problem, but there's also a political problem, and the political problem is that it just doesn't seem to be as high a priority for Donald Trump as it is for the UK. And this story in The Guardian from Kieran Stacey and Eleni Courier is saying that people from inside the White House have briefed UK officials that the Trump administration has sort of separated countries into three categories for a trade deal: top priority, middle priority, lower priority. And the briefing is that the UK is not in the top category. It's either in the middle category or, worse still, potentially in the lowest priority category. So this is not great news for the government, really.
Is this a surprise to you, Ali, that the UK could potentially be so far down?
Not massively, although it does show that sucking up that we did by waiving the letter from the King.
I mean,
come on, Donald. I mean, give us a break. I mean, you know, we tried.
Surely that's worth the trade.
Of course. Look, the interesting thing is Sonia mentions this point about the EU, and this is becoming a question now for the government to think about which lane does it pick. It's trying to ride both horses at the same time. I don't know how long it can do it for, because the EU, for example, only in the last few days, the government's been briefing out that it wants to have the same certification regime for British goods which are certified here to be applicable in the EU to reduce the trade barriers, so reduce the frictions. Now, if they're trying to get closer on that, they're going to have to give something to the EU, a youth mobility scheme, or there's going to be some negotiation. Now, as part of all of this, if we're going to have similar standards to the EU, that is going to be a problem for the US. There's also issues around chlorinated chicken, about whether they want access to the NHS, all of these things. And that's even before you get to the point that we're not even first in the queue. So I've always been a bit sceptical about how quickly this full-on trade deal will come off. I thought there'd be some economic arrangement of some kind. But at the moment, it looks like the US government's got bigger fish to fry. And frankly, we're not at the top of their list.
Do you think that we could potentially see the UK lowering their food quality standards, for instance, and allowing chlorinated chicken or hormone injected beef?
I suspect not. A, because I don't think that would be very popular with the public. And B, because I think the government know if you're looking to make a big economic impact through a trade deal, you've got to go down the EU route because they are our closest and biggest trading partner. And that really matters in terms of exports and imports, geographical proximity. And, Brexit was a bonkers decision, really, in economic terms. It was an act of economic self-harm.
Technical term, though.
That technical term. This is Sonia, the economist, speaking.
Bonkers.
But, the last thing you do as a country, if you are looking to boost your growth, is to erect trade barriers with your nearest trading bloc, which is what we did. Absolutely crazy. There are different political considerations, but economically it was a crazy thing to do. And the Labour government are looking, they don't want to take us back into the single market and customs union, although I think they ought to, quite frankly, and I suspect we will end up there in this very insecure, changeable world where actually it's not very clear where the growth is going to come from the UK. But they are looking to move us closer to the EU because it's economic necessity. They've got to deliver growth. That is what everything that they want to deliver hinges upon. And, getting a trade deal with the EU is a much more fail-safe way of delivering some of that growth than a trade deal with the US. So I personally do not think we're going to see watered down standards. I think the EU are going to keep us honest on our standards.
But we'll see, as Ali suggests, how long Sir Keir Starmer can ride those two horses at the same time. Let's go to the FT, Ali, and the US trade deficit at a record high. The gap between imports and exports widened in March from 92.8 billion for the same period a year ago to 162 billion, marking the highest figure on record, stretching into the early 1990s. This is according to the US Census Bureau.
Yes, and this is all because people are stockpiling goods. That's why, because inflation is going to go up because of tariffs, so people are stockpiling, and this is causing this massive increase in the trade deficit, which is something that Donald Trump is very, very focused on. You've also now got leading investment banks, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all predicting that the US economy is going to contract in Q1. That is not good news. Potentially now we're on recession watch, and if the US catches a recession, we know what happens to the rest of the world. Things are not that great here economically anyway. Sonia just mentioned growth. I mean, growth is very elusive. The government's trying to search high and low for it everywhere it can. If the US trade gap worsens, US consumers face more and more difficulties. The Chinese are now hitting back because they're not going to take this lying down. They put their own tariffs on US goods, and they're facing 145% tariffs on their goods to the US. The thing with Trump is he's picked this battle, particularly with China, and it's one that I don't think he's thought through for two reasons. One is China is massively embedded in global supply chains, including US supply chains. And secondly, they have 800 billion worth of US treasuries, right? So this whole thing about the dollar being the reserve currency of the world, Trump's playing with it. Now, maybe he wants to break the dollar. Maybe he wants to actually see that reserve currency status broken so the dollar devalues, which makes its exports more competitive. That is a big move, a really big move, because what he's then doing is he's pushing people further towards the renminbi or other currencies, and the dollar will weaken over time.
To the Guardian, Sonia, we'll move on. Well, not really, actually, because we were talking about consumers, and it's absolutely linked. And this is the Amazon row, who Caroline Levitt attacked very fulsomely in the White House earlier. Explain.
So there were rumours emerging, quite well-placed rumours, I think, that Amazon was all set to start publishing on its website to US consumers exactly how much of the increase in their goods was down to Trump's tariffs. Actually, a very, very effective piece of campaigning against tariffs if you're a business and you want to get these tariffs reduced, because it makes it very transparent to consumers. But Trump apparently heard about this and went, absolutely mad. He's been close to Jeff Bezos in the past, the owner of Amazon. Apparently, I heard, there's a rumour, he called him up in a rage this afternoon. Anyway, there's been very clear signals from the White House publicly as well as behind closed doors. And it now appears that Amazon will not be doing this.
Surprise, surprise.
So there you go.
Well, Bezos is quite a close ally. He was at the inauguration, wasn't he? But Caroline Levitt says, why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years?
Well, because inflation is just price rises. So, I mean...
reporting what she said.
Yeah, no, I know, of course. I was answering the question.
I thought it was quite a cute move by Amazon because ultimately, sooner or later, US consumers are going to face the pressure of this. Now, I understand that Trump's whole basis for doing this is to try and reshore production into the US. He wants to build up the US manufacturing base. He wants to bring jobs back to America. It may be quite laudable in some ways, but what he doesn't understand is, or maybe he does, but it doesn't care, is that international supply chains are very interwoven. They're completely bound up. And it's also intermediate goods that you're importing from other countries, particularly China, that are used in your own supply chains to produce end goods already in the US. So all of those are going to rise. And it'll be very interesting. I mean, look, his approval rating's already one of the lowest in history for a 100-day president. But the thing is, he doesn't care because he's been liberated from this, because we don't think he's going for a third term. Some people think he's going for a third term, but he's not constitutionally allowed to, so he can do what he wants.
He has said that it is possible, though, but he hasn't confirmed that he could go for a third term. Ali and Sonia, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. But just a reminder that President Trump is due to address a rally, we believe, from around 11 o'clock, thereabouts. And we'll, of course, bring that to you live as soon as it begins. Coming up, are the government's net zero plans doomed to fail? So Tony Blair seems to think so. We'll discuss that when we come back.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest 'Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
The Premier League run-in is live on NBC and streaming on Peacock, with crucial fixtures in the race for Europe. Saturday, Arsenal look to finish strong against Bournemouth.
Expect the unexpected.
Sunday, exclusively on Peacock, Champions League hopefuls Chelsea take on the Premier League champions Liverpool. This is the Premier League run-in, live on NBC and Peacock.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle. treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Ali Miraj and Sonia Soda. Let's take a look in this section. Start off with the Times and Mark Carney's victory, his election triumph. The Times headline there. Very much a coming from behind candidate that prior to Donald Trump re-emerging in the White House perhaps might not be in the position that he is today as Prime Minister, because he's really put up a very, very strong fight against Donald Trump, and that seems to be the reason for his success, Ali.
That's exactly right. I remember asking Mark Carney probably 2 years ago now whether he would stand. We bumped into him in Berlin at a big conference. And I did ask him, are you going to stand? And he was very sheepish about it at the time. He smiled and he asked me, well, should I? I said, well, you should if you want to make a difference. And he has.
We've got you to
well, I mean, we had, look,
credit with this.
He's an extremely intelligent guy, Mark Carney. Very, very intelligent. He's coming out and saying, and he's quoted in the piece in the Times in his victory speech, saying the country would not be broken by trade, tariffs, or efforts to dismantle its sovereignty. And he's absolutely right, because the US, the biggest trading partner Canada has is the US. I mean, most of its exports go south. They're basically cousins. And Trump has come in and effectively said, you are going to be the 51st state, and Governor Trudeau was, and all this stuff. And we know that Trudeau had to go, and he'd stayed too long anyway, and Carney came in. Now, Poilievre, who was the head of the Conservatives, was 23 points ahead back in December. It was cruising to victory. Then Trump came in and has basically messed it all up for the Conservatives here, because there's been a massive backlash in Canada and a sense of real coming together to say, we're not going to be bullied by Donald Trump. Carney is a complete technocrat, a complete epitome of Davos, man. I mean, this is the revenge of the globalists over the populists that's happened here. And it's been in large part, orchestrated by Donald Trump, unwittingly, I suppose. I mean, even yesterday he was putting out on Truth Social that you should go and vote for the Conservatives. And Poilievre was probably pulling his hair out. Poilievre's lost his own seat.
Don't associate with me.
But Carney is not a politician. He's come from nowhere. He's credible. He was governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England. He's a sensible, very, very thoughtful individual. He's not a politician, but he's done well. And they've got 3 seats, sort of a majority, and in good position now.
And he stood up as the figurehead of the Canadian fight back, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an interesting question coming out of this, actually, is the extent to which Trump changes the course of domestic politics in other countries.
It's true.
And, it's quite interesting. Reform are still quite closely associated with Trump. Farage has been very close to Trump in the past. It's going to be quite interesting to see Reform are riding high in the polls at the moment. It'd be interesting to see if there is a similar effect on them.
Let's have a look at the Telegraph. Sonia, take us into to this one. And this is Tony Blair, former Prime Minister, erstwhile Prime Minister, commenting on net zero policies of this government.
Yeah,
so
and
really going head-to-head with Sir Keir Starmer.
It's a big political story. It features on quite a few of the front pages, actually. And Tony Blair seems to be saying these policies are expensive and they're not going to get us to net zero. I'm not actually quite clear on what his proposed alternative is. I mean, I think he's talking very much about kind of putting our faith in technology. Blair's a big believer in technology as a sort of, saviour of us all at the moment. And I suppose there is this debate around climate. You know, some people say we really have to reduce consumption. That is the only way we're going to prevent catastrophic climate change that is the end of all of us. And some people say, no, technology will save us. There'll be these magic technological advances that mean that we can consume at the same rate, it just won't have the same carbon output. And maybe that's a bit of what Blair is saying. But, I mean, it is not very helpful for the government, let's put it like that. I think where he's maybe got a bit of a point is that it is really important for politicians to be upfront about trade-offs. And there are trade-offs with net zero policies.
Right.
They come with costs. And personally, I think it's very important that the costs are not loaded onto the poorest in society and those with the broadest shoulders paid. So I think he's got a point there, but I'm really unclear, because he clearly cares about climate. I'm very unclear on what his proposed alternative is.
I agree with Sonia. I'm also slightly unclear, but I tell you what is clear, is what he says here. He's saying that people are being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. Now, I was having a conversation on my show with Just Stop Oil just on Sunday, because they're saying they're hanging up their high-vis vests now because their direct action thing is that they've achieved what they wanted to achieve. And
annoying a lot of people.
By annoying a lot of people. The thing is, the question I asked them and other well-meaning activists, and I also believe in net zero and I want to decarbonise, is that we are a pinprick in the world's carbon emissions. I mean, you're looking at China, you're looking at India, you look at the US. That's where the real conversation has to happen. But you won't get Just Stop Oil or any other eco people going and campaigning in Tiananmen Square for obvious reasons, right? They don't want to have the same fate that happened to the Arctic 30 when they got shot at when they were trying to scale an oil rig going by Gazprom. But the point that he's making is, you've got to be honest with the public. It's going to be de minimis impact that's going to happen here. As to what the solution is, I think he's probably saying be a bit more realistic. Technology will help, but it's unclear. It is unclear what his solution
perhaps
is.
Perhaps the speed of moving ahead should be slowed down. This is one of the things he's looking at.